Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is you're watching this video. Welcome to my YouTube channel and to this video tutorial. There are already many tutorials for building fast track turnouts available online, including those produced by the tool manufacturers. Yet since I've been offering these turnouts for sale, I've often been contacted by people asking for advice without ever ordering any turnouts from me. This leads me to believe that there are many people out there who value my knowledge while not feeling completely comfortable with the official documentation. Sometimes it just takes tuition from more than one teacher before something makes sense. I've been hand building track and turnouts for decades without jigs, and also recently have constructed over 250 turnouts using the Fast Tracks tools. So I feel that I am more than qualified to present my version of a Fast Tracks turnout tutorial. It's a bit too long for one video, so I split it into 3 segments. Be sure to check out the other 2 parts, and also the video that I published earlier showing various random hints. Now, if after viewing my tutorials and the official documentation, you feel that you are ready to tackle building your own turnouts, then that's fantastic. I will be honoured to have been the catalyst in introducing you to this fascinating aspect of the hobby. If on the other hand, you still feel that hand building turnouts is still beyond your capabilities, or if you don't think it's something you're going to enjoy, or if you don't want to invest the time, or if the turnouts that you need are of many different configurations and the cost of the tools would be prohibitive, then I hope you will consider ordering the turnouts you need through my website. Well, anyway, that's enough introduction. Let's now head over to the workbench and build some turnouts. Well, all the turnouts have now been assembled, and they are sitting here with the previous batch that I did. Now, from this point, there is no longer any risk of getting the parts mixed up, so it's okay to work on a batch of several different kinds of turnouts at once, and often I do that, although in this case they're all number 7s. These turnout skeletons may look complete, but there's still a lot of work to do yet. The next thing I'm going to do is, with a variety of files, I'm going to make sure that the switch points fit nice and smoothly against the stock rails. Now the straight switch point here is absolutely perfect. The curved one is a little bit of a bump, so I'm going to give this a bit of a clean up. In some cases the triangular file works best. In others I like this really thin flexible file. Depends on what I'm trying to do. Here all I'm doing is just shaving it a little bit thinner. I think this is probably one of those that I had to cut the end off because it broke. And that is already perfect. There is no tendency for it to pick my finger, and therefore it won't pick at the flanges either. And now I've got to file all the electrical gaps in the copper ties. If you recall, during assembly I did this one here and this one here that's very difficult to get hold of. But the others, they're a lot easier leaving it to the end when you can use the entire turnout as a handle. And also in some cases I do them 2 at a time, 2 or 3 at a time. And also there's still a lot of flux residue on it, and for the cleanup I use a toothbrush. I used to use one of these file cleaning brushes from Fast Tracks per their recommendation, but the bristles were a little bit too stiff. Then I started using my old leftover toothbrushes, but those are a little bit soft because I use soft toothbrushes. This is an extra firm, which is a lot better. Right now I'm using a brand new toothbrush because nobody in my household uses firm toothbrushes, so I have to buy them specifically for this job. all the cleanup finished on the whole batch, now it's time to cut the electrical gaps around the frog. And to do that, you need to clamp it in a small bench vise and then use a jeweler's saw, put the blade through on the inside. Need to get nice and tight. This is the one by New Concepts, as sold by Fast Tracks, and it's a nice saw. It's a bit expensive, but I think it's worth it. Buy a good supply of blades because they tend to break fairly easily. I mean, this one here I've used for over 20 turnouts already, but sometimes I'll break 2 or 3 in quick succession. Now that one I got away with, the clamp wasn't tight enough. Usually if it comes out it will break before I have time to adjust it. Each turnout has 4 gaps that have to be cut, 2 each end of the frog. I don't know if you noticed there, but after I got through I pulled the blade up backwards through the cut. The idea behind that is that if there's metal dust still in the cut, that will help to clean it out. I probably should mention that when setting up your jeweler's saw, the blade needs to be put in so that you cut on the pull stroke, not the push stroke. Even so, to start and end the cut you might have to push against the blade. But that one is now done. This is ready for electrical testing. Now that the gaps either side of the frog have been cut in all the turnouts, it's time to get the electrical test meter out and to run an electrical test. And there are actually 8 separate tests that need to be done. What I'm doing now is checking for continuity across areas of the turnout that need to be isolated. The first thing I test are the 2 closure rails to make sure those are isolated. Then I do the 2 exit rails from the frog, same there, make sure those are isolated. And then the remaining tests, the frog has to be confirmed to be isolated from all 6 of the zones around it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I run the second probe into the frog just to make sure that I get a beep and to make sure that this frog probe is indeed doing its job. Now I do realize that these 2 rails here, the closure and the stock rail, are connected, as are these 2. So really you only need to do 4 tests with the frog instead of 6. But a certain amount of redundancy in testing is generally a good thing anyway. Now all of these turnouts are good to go, so I'm going to head over to my other bench and test them mechanically. Well, here I am at my testing bench, ready to do the mechanical test on this batch of turnouts. I have 3 yards of micro-engineering flex track which I've soldered rail joints to the ends of, and I just install those to all the X's of the turnout. If you look closely you'll see that there are joints part way along. That's because I have spliced code 83 and code 70 together. So depending on which rail size I have in the turnout I'm testing, I can just turn them around. And because Fast Track's turnouts don't always hold themselves all the way over without help, I've got 2 little push sticks here. These are actually offcuts from the copper clad ties, and I use these point form tools to weight them. Now my test train is a passenger car with 6-wheel trucks, a freight car with 4-wheel trucks, and another freight car that I'm using to push on because it would take too long to hook up electrical power to do this with a locomotive. And the first thing I do is push the test train through in both directions slowly, and I'm looking for jolts. Here I had a jolt at this frog. It's not doing it now, but it was enough of a jolt just now that I have to get the NMRA gauge and see what's wrong with it. That's the problem. I had a bristle from my toothbrush was in the frog. So I'm going to push it through slowly. Now I know this first truck on this passenger car, the back-to-back is a little bit tight. So if I get this through without problems, then I know I have some tolerance. So after running through slowly, I then run through quickly. And then I switch over and do the other side. Again, running slowly through first, and here I'm watching the trucks to make sure they run smoothly. And then of course the ultimate test with any turnout is backing a train through at a high speed. So that's what I'm duplicating here. And on that second test, as long as it doesn't derail, then I know it's a good turnout. So that one has now passed. Well, I've finished all the left-hand turnouts, and I'm now on the right-handers, and I've got one that's a little bit tight here. If we watch the passenger car as it goes through the frog, it's jolting slightly. Not just on the front truck where, as I said, one of the axles is slightly under gauge, but both trucks. So that tells me I have an issue with this frog. It's barely perceptible. There's a little bit of a tight spot here. And that is now working fine. So this is why I do this test, looking for any possible imperfections. Just 6 more to go. Well, this concludes the test. All 18 of these turnouts are now perfect. There were 2 turnouts that I needed minor adjustments on the curved route through the frog, which I find is about normal for a batch of that size. The last step of the process is to attach the quick sticks. Now for this I use this super glue that I buy on eBay, 100 tubes at a time, and 1 tube is plenty to do a single turnout. Actually it's enough to do 2 number 6s or shorter. It's nearly enough to do 2 number 7s, but not quite. And it will do 1 of even the longest turnouts that I ever do. And it has a really small applicator, which is the main reason why I like this glue. Now I start by prepping several tubes. I just poke my knife point through the seal. and I'm using the roll that my solder came in as a holder, just to keep it right side up. Now on the quick sticks there are two individual ties here, and depending on whether you're using fixed or hinged points, one of these has to come out. I always offer it up before I get the glue out, just to make sure that I've got it right. And there's a few places on the turnout where there's not a lot of gluing area. And what I do is I scratch those areas with a knife blade, both on the areas where there's a single tie at this end and back here, and on the area beside the switch points where the rail has been ground down to less than half its width. That gives the rail a little bit of a tooth and it binds better. It's not necessary on the rest of the turnout where there is plenty of gluing area. And I start from the heel of the turnout and just put a thin bead along each rail. Now I used to be paranoid about getting glue in between the point rails and the stock rails, but I've since discovered that it's a lot easier to fix it than it is to avoid the problem in the first place. So now I'm not too worried about it. Position it accurately, starting at the toe, hold it down, and then put the other end in. Just apply a little bit of pressure all the way along, and then I use my point filing tools as weights and put it aside. Well, I've left these turnouts for about half an hour under weights. I don't need to leave it that long, but I always head upstairs and do something else. And the first thing I do before I break the quick sticks off is check to see if the point rails will move. And in most cases they need a little bit of assistance, because more often than not small amounts of glue will get under them. And I just use a regular X-Acto knife and just gently ease them out both sides. And now these work again. This side it seats perfectly. The other side I think I might have a small amount of glue in the gap. So I need to address that with a file. Okay, and now it's seating perfectly on both sides. So the last thing I can do is to gently break away the quick stick. Now this is a useful bit of plywood, makes a great shim. I've got a drawer full of them, so I'm just going to throw these away. And now what I do is I gently twist the turnout, holding the wide end firmly and checking the first few areas of ties, because these are the bits that tend to flake off occasionally if they're not properly glued. But this one passes, so that turnout is now finished. Well, that's all for this segment. Be sure to check out the other two segments of this tutorial and also the hints video that I published earlier. If you now feel ready to tackle building your own turnouts, that's great. The people at Fast Track will appreciate your business. If not, then I hope you will consider having me build them for you instead. I hope you found this tutorial useful and hope to also see you again in many of my other videos. In the meantime, thanks for watching and bye for now.